All right, it is time to judge the 49ers roster. Has their defense actually improved? Because they were really bad in 2024. Now, notice that this is not a 49ers 2025 team judgment. This is a roster judgment. I understand that they haven't played any games yet, but I also understand that free agency by and large is over. Obviously, there could still be a surprise addition down the road. The trade market is going to remain available to the 49ers into the deadline, but they've already utilized it for a big fish in Bryce Huff, and the NFL draft, which they've poured a ton of defensive effort into. That is also in the past. So the need to restock was clear at the end of the 2024 season. The 49ers have had their opportunities to restock. We can take a look at the entire roster now. I think this probably looks familiar to those of you who have watched me for a while. I broke down the defensive line strategy before the draft actually happened. This is what it now looks like after the draft. We're going to compare and contrast with the Eagles and with the Rams, especially the Rams, because they've been a model for the 49ers. And we're going to make our roster judgments going through all three levels of this 49ers defense. That's just our judgment on the roster. Then the roster is actually going to have to go out and play. They're going to have to prove it. Maybe they'll prove us wrong with some of our assessments. Maybe they'll prove us right with some of our assessments. But I will have to start with the overarching piece here. The 49ers' biggest addition, maybe to the entire team over the course of this offseason, before they could even sign new players. And that is Robert Saleh. That's why he's on the thumbnail. For all the personnel deficiencies that the 49ers ran into after the massive rash of injuries in 2024, I thought that their biggest Achilles heel last year was their inability to adjust schematically. Even though so many guys were hurt, and I think that the tipping point where the bottom really fell out came in November against the Seattle Seahawks when Nick Bosa got hurt. They're averaging what? We're giving up less than 4 yards per play over the first half of that game when Bosa was in there. Went up to almost 7 yards per play after Bosa suffered the injury. So things cratered after Bosa went out. But I will maintain, and I use the 2020 season as my strongest example, I will maintain that you should be able to patch together a reasonably okay defense, even at the injury level that the 49ers saw in 2024. Because in 2020, they definitely did that. In 2020, I would argue that they were worse off with the injuries. Nick Bosa tore his ACL very early on against the New York Jets in week 2. They lost Solomon Thomas either the play before or the play after that. And obviously that was just a crazy rash of injuries. But the way that the 49ers were able to stay afloat in that 2020 season was that even if they lost a lot of firepower, they were able to stay decently rigid against the run. And that's something that completely cratered in 2024. So I think that the fact that they've got a coordinator who has shown that he's got a performance floor, it's not just about the ceiling with Robert Saleh. He will not let the bottom drop out of a defense the way that we saw it drop out last year with Nick Sorensen. I think that is huge for the 49ers in terms of improvement heading into this 2025 season. Anyway, I want to start with the defensive line before we get into some of the more detailed numbers of this defense. I think I'm going to zoom back out. We're going to look at overarching performance over the years under Saleh, all this and all that. But I want to go through level by level. And, we could start with the defensive line. There was a big issue with the 49ers defensive line when this offseason began, and we immediately identified that they were following the Rams formula of building the D-line. Well, we made these charts right here, tables, charts, illustrations, whatever you want to call it. On the right is the Rams defensive line from last year, 2024. On the left is the 49ers D-line from 2024. In the acquisition method column, you've got color coding. If there is a colored shade, that means the player was acquired either through the NFL draft or through undrafted free agency. So added as a rookie, young, hungry, cost controlled talent. The Rams went ham as far as building their defensive line with rookie talent. And it really started to pay off for them toward the end of 2024. Meanwhile, the team that broke down at the end of 2024, it's on the left. That's the 49ers. Look how much more shading there is in the acquisition method column for the Rams than there was for the 49ers. San Francisco had not used valuable draft capital on the defensive line entering this draft since 2022 when they spent pick number 61 on Drake Jackson. They had not spent a first-round pick on a defensive lineman since 2020 when they drafted Javon Kinlaw. Well, Kinlaw was no longer on the team in 2024, and you could see that San Francisco had to patch a lot of holes with free agents. I don't think that it's surprising that the defensive line ended up struggling. Well, so remember the Rams formula over here on the right. Now take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles formula. This was obviously the best defensive line in football. They won the Super Bowl this past season. Same kind of idea, although they built this over a longer period of time. The Rams was essentially over 2 drafts. You can see all the shading on the left. Look at the Eagles, very draft-oriented as well for Philadelphia. So we compare that to the 49ers in 2024. It definitely a lot more sparse when it came to that hungry, young, cost-controlled talent. Well, why don't we now fast forward to 2025? This is a projection of the 49ers defensive line and the 53-man roster. So no, we can't assure you that all of these guys are going to make the team. But already there's a whole lot more gold there than there was last season. So after this offseason's construction, this is what the 49ers defensive end room looks like, and this is what their defensive tackle room looks like, at least as far as projections to make the roster. Now, I get it. Somebody like Robert Beal Jr. might not make the team, and somebody like Sam Okawanu might make the team instead of him. That would make the top look a little bit different, but you can see the investments that the 49ers have made. Mykel Williams, first-round draft pick in 2025. He's added to the top, where last year the 49ers were very, very free agent heavy. At the bottom, Alfred Collins and C.J. West added to the team. This is the second straight year that the 49ers have been aggressively adding rookies to this defense. Don't forget that Evan Anderson, undrafted free agent in 2024, was added to that defensive tackle room last year. Kevin Givens has been a homegrown guy since 2019. He's still with the team. If there's a player on here that I think is a veteran who's on a little bit of a hot seat, it's one of the free agent additions, and it's Jordan Elliott, the defensive tackle there at the bottom. If the 49ers can find a way to get some pass rushing juice out of some of their deeper rotational defensive tackles, maybe Jordan Elliott doesn't end up on the 53-man roster. But anyway, my point remains that the 49ers have reinfused the defensive line room with young talent. Now it's a question of how well is this young talent going to perform. There are several different machinations that I think the 49ers want to establish up front. All of it comes down to stopping the run first and then rushing the passer off of that. I think that they would love to have the base defensive line of Nick Bosa on one end and Mykel Williams, the rookie first-round pick, on the other, because they think that he's such a good edge setter against the run. And I think they ultimately would love to have C.J. West and Alfred Collins as part of their base 4 on the inside. Give me a second here. My phone is playing the show. Do you guys hear this? I guess my phone just randomly decided to play on YouTube. So give me a second. All right, we are back. I have no idea what that was about. All of a sudden, I just started hearing my own voice. It's like, where's that coming from? I thought somebody had broken into the apartment, but it sounded familiar, and it happened to be me because the YouTube live was playing on my phone, and the phone was across the room. So I went and got it, and we're good. So ideal defensive line for the 49ers. 3 out of the 4 guys are rookies in a base situation. Ideal pass rushing package. That's when you start to talk about Bryce Huff coming in. The 49ers were not terrible pass rushers last year. The problem was they couldn't get into pass rushing situations because their run defense was so bad. So they obviously let go of veterans who were decent pass rushers. Malik Collins on the inside, Leonard Floyd on the outside. Jalen Hargrave was a really, really good pass rusher for the 49ers, but those guys weren't great run defenders. First and foremost, you have to improve the run. That is what the rookie signees are all about. And then you tee off against the pass. That is what Bryce Huff is all about. So on paper, they had to change what they were doing along the defensive line because you will not beat anybody if you're not stopping the run. You will lose to every single team in the NFL if that happens. And it started to look like that was the trend for the 49ers down the stretch run of the 2024 season. So they did make those changes, and now Robert Saleh inherits a group that I think he had a lot of influence over selecting. They used their first 5 picks on defensive players. 3 of those 5 picks were on defensive linemen. It's the first time since 1981 that they used their first 5 draft picks on the defense. That was the Ronnie Lott draft. That was a year that turned into a Super Bowl for the 49ers. So obviously they were intent on replenishing the side of the ball that cost them the most in 2024. This is just a roster judgment. This is not a 2025 team judgment. This is just a look at what the 49ers have so far with that roster. This is a look at it on the defensive side of the ball. And I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of raw new materials in that defensive line. New players are shaded in green. We've gone over this a few times already. New players as in rookies are shaded in green. Teal is new players as in veterans. So between West, Collins, Williams, and Bryce Huff, that is 4 new defensive linemen who are expected to be very, very active parts of the 49ers rotation. For the defensive line, I ask, how could it be worse than last year? It's so funny because so many people were up in arms. Oh my God, they lost Malik Collins. They lost Leonard Floyd, as if this was some fearsome unit like the 2007 New York Giants defensive line losing elite talent. I mean, they lost some decently productive pass rushers, but the 49ers were so flawed up front last year. And I don't fault them for going out and trading for Malik Collins. I don't fault them for going out and signing Leonard Floyd. They had a very different set of circumstances when they added those players. The team was coming off of a heartbreaking Super Bowl loss. They had been to either the Super Bowl and the NFC Championship game in 3 straight seasons. They just needed to get that little extra nudge. They needed to push it just a tiny bit further. So they didn't want to completely start over. They just wanted to give themselves a little bit of a boost. They went and got a cleanup sack guy in Leonard Floyd, and they wanted to replace Eric Armstead, who they were unable to keep on the team because of the salary inefficiency. So they got Malik Collins to try to make up for Eric Armstead. It made a lot of sense if they were just trying to get one more year out of the setup that they had, and they rode to the Super Bowl in that 2023 season. But then, everything really went kaput. The wheels came off in 2024. You lost guys to injuries at all different parts of the roster. The 49ers were, it was like you have a plan until you get punched in the face. And once they got punched in the face and things started spinning out of control, the entire premise of let's just hold on for dear life and try to stretch this 3-year run into 4 years started looking really, really bad, right? And I think it was around the time of that Seattle game where Nick Bosa suffered the oblique injury where it became apparent that that was the case. So all of a sudden, you have to pick yourself up and you have to look at 2025 and how to best proceed moving forward. And you have to be honest with yourself and you have to say, even though that probably, was the logical way to approach 2024, guys like Malik Collins and Leonard Floyd, veterans on the wrong side of 30, it's probably not the right way to approach 2025. Now, 2024 was your sign. The rope has run out. Now you've got to restart. The rope had run out, so they were able to bring back Robert Saleh. That timed really well for them, and they decided to detonate the aging veteran core of that defensive line, and they decided to replace it with fresh blood. And given how things spun out of control, especially against the run last year, I think it makes a whole lot of sense, which is why I find it so comical that people were complaining. Oh, yeah, this wasn't working. This embarrassed us. Nick Bosa literally said this is an embarrassing product. Why don't we bring back the same product that embarrassed us? This is the most competitive league in the world. The same product that embarrassed us just because I recognize the name Malik Collins, just because I recognize the name Leonard Floyd. Let's bring that back. Oh, they're being cheap by not bringing. No, they're being smart by diverting from something that wasn't working. I think it was always as simple as that for this 49ers defensive line. Reinfused with young talent. There's something to be said about the hungriness of a team, and I think it's even more important on the defensive side of the ball than the offensive side of the ball. There's obviously something to be said about the freshness of a team. All of those things are correlated with age. So you want to, in the NFL, the average age is 26 years old. So players who are 29, 30, 31, unless these are Hall of Fame type of talents, they cannot reasonably be expected to produce at optimal peak levels. Yeah, you can fill in here or there with certain veterans, but the general core of your team needs to have some youthful exuberance to it. The 49ers obviously were getting older and older with each passing season because they were hanging on. In 2021, they went to the NFC Championship game. Same thing in 2022. In 2023, they broke through and they made it to the Super Bowl. You almost owe it to the core that has grown through those 3 years. You almost owe it to them to perform until failure. It's like if you go lift weights, one of the toughest things to do is say, okay, let's go lift until failure. Do this set. I'm not saying it's a set of 8. I'm not going to say it's a set of 10. I'm not going to say it's a set of 6. This is a set until failure. It's up until you can't get that weight up anymore. Until when you're struggling with the bar and it's shaking right here, you can't get it up. Okay, we're done. Spotter helps you out and puts it back up on the rack. The 49ers, I think, owed it to themselves, their fans, the core, to go up until failure. And failure was 2024. Now, the thing is that they still had so many star players who are still very capable on this roster because so much of what happened last year in a negative sense was injury fueled, that they had to turn around and maintain that core. You're not going to blow up the core. You're not going to enter a full-scale rebuild, but you better as hell renovate the roster around them because you saw the holes in that regard. And I think that's what makes this defensive roster analysis so fascinating. So the linebacker level also looks very, very different. Have a look at the linebackers. I've mentioned this a couple times, and I think now is a good opportunity to go further in depth on this. At linebacker, the 49ers, when I was watching them at the first OTA practice a couple weeks ago, I was blown away by the new number association game that I had to play. It's like, 57. Who the hell is that? Because it's certainly not Dre Greenlaw. He's in Denver now. Oh, that's Luke Gifford. Chaz Surratt is now there for San Francisco. Tatum Bethune back this year. Nick Martin, new player. He's wearing the 45 for the 49ers. Stone Blanton wasn't there for rookie mini camp, but he's been there for OTAs. He was getting married during rookie mini camp. He's a rookie out of Mississippi State. Jalen Graham is back, and Curtis Robinson's on the team, but he tore his ACL and he's still recovering from that. So you've got, I honestly think that the most compelling battle on this 49ers maybe roster, but for sure on the defense is going to be the battle for the second linebacker spot. Because D. Winters was progressing last year and progressed a lot, I think, over the course of this offseason. The 49ers have been very complimentary about what D. Winters has done. But Nick Martin is the guy who's getting the hype and a lot of it. And rightfully so. I mean, the tape at Oklahoma State is damn impressive for Nick Martin. But I think that anytime that you have an emotional personnel loss like the 49ers did with Dre Greenlaw, and then you turn around and you draft the guy and you say he reminds us of Dre Greenlaw, there's going to be a lot of intrigue about that player. And that's where Nick Martin is right now. Now, this is the misconception that the national media gets about the 49ers defense. And I see this written over and over and over again. And it's like, guys, would you please stop broadcasting that you just don't pay attention to the 49ers? They're like, San Francisco is going to take a step back in 2025 because they are losing the likes of Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, Charvarius Ward. And I mean, these people are just outing themselves. They didn't pay attention to the 49ers last year because Dre Greenlaw played 35 snaps. He played 35 snaps, and they're saying that they lost Dre Greenlaw's production and that it's going to cause a downhill slide in 2025. Talanoa Hufanga also did not play a whole heck of a lot for the 49ers, and when he did, he was definitely not at his most effective self. Same could be said for Charvarius Ward, dealing with the personal tragedy that he went through last year. It was not his top season. We need to let go of the fantasy. And by we, I'm referring to the national media, or people not watching this all that closely. So people need to let go of the fantasy that the 49ers lost 3 players who delivered all pro seasons in 2024, because they certainly did not. In fact, they were so thin at linebacker because Dre Greenlaw wasn't available to go for the season that they had to sign somebody who quit on them. Somebody they didn't want, who wasn't even their first choice as a fill-in in Devondre Campbell. They wanted Eric Kendricks, but he backed out. And then Devondre Campbell literally walked out of a game against the Los Angeles Rams. That's when, everything was lost for the 49ers. It was a game they really needed to win late in the season. Anyway, you get the point. They were not working with a very fresh, enthusiastic cupboard on defense last year. On top of that, Fred Warner broke his ankle in week 4 and played on that for the rest of the season. There was so much tragedy and injury and just difficulty for the 49ers. So the fact that there are a lot of new faces is a good thing. And then speaking specifically about the linebacker room, it's not like Nick Martin is coming in and replacing Dre Greenlaw's prime season. Nick Martin is coming in and he's going to be competing with D. Winters, and they need to find a way to improve on a season where linebacker 2 saw Dre Greenlaw take only 35 snaps and saw Devondre Campbell walk out on the team. I think that's a lot more reasonable to expect that the 49ers can improve on that than it is to say, they'll never get better because Dre Greenlaw is now gone. They were not in a good space to begin with in 2024. All right, and now moving over to the secondary. The secondary, you noticed as we track this over the course of this offseason, before they got to the NFL draft, one thing that I pointed out was, because this was before Bryce Huff had been traded. So Teal is a veteran addition, right? So after free agency, before the draft, Huff wasn't on here, and all of the Teal was in the back 7. And Chaz Surratt wasn't on there either. So it was only Luke Gifford in the linebacker room. So the vast majority of the Teal was in the secondary, which is down here. Cornerback, Trey Brown, Saran Neal, specialist, Richie Grant, safety, Jason Pinnock, the safety. So basically, what we said is what we predicted at the time was, look, the 49ers are setting themselves up with a floor through their veteran signings in free agency at the secondary position. So they're not desperate to draft anybody. That way, they can use all of their draft capital on the front seven. And look what happened. They used 3 of those first 5 picks on defensive linemen. They used another one on Nick Martin. And then they actually used one of the third rounders on a nickelback, Upton Stout. But it's not mandatory that Upton Stout starts for the 49ers at nickelback because Trey Brown has starting experience at the outside cornerback position, and they could just run the whole Diamond or Lenore slide inside strategy if need be in 2025. That's if Upton Stout doesn't deliver. But free agency set the primary backdrop for how the 49ers built this defense. They insulated veteran-wise in the secondary. They went super young in the front seven. They used the draft to build the front seven. That's why you've got all the green over here and you got all the teal down here. Now, of course, that's not a hard and fast rule. You have some crossover with somebody like Upton Stout, and then later they added a veteran through a trade with Bryce Huff. And I think any healthy NFL roster mixes and matches the youth and the veteran players as well as possible. And I think that ultimately the 49ers feel that they have struck the right balance. Consider the fact that last year in 2024, they successfully added to the cornerback position with Renardo Green, the second-round pick out of Florida State. So you already have a recent draftee at one of the outside cornerback positions. Where you didn't have a recent draftee was defensive line. And they decided to pour those draft resources into the front. So a balancing act for the 49ers. They've gotten now significantly younger. I think they've gotten faster. And when I look at somebody like CJ West up front, I'll say that they've gotten stronger. Have you seen his arms? My goodness, he's got violent hands. All these guys have great track records as far as stopping the run, which is what the 49ers need to do most. Now it's about going out there and proving it in 2025. Again, it is not a high bar to clear. They were pathetic defensively to close that 2024 season. So that's not a high bar to clear. Now it's a question of just how high can the 49ers go defensively. Is this going to be a number 15 unit? Is this going to be a top 10 unit? Is the Robert Saleh impact going to make them better than the sum of their parts by week 4? Is it not going to really kick in until December? You know, when I talk about the Rams formula, and we could go back to that Rams formula right here on the right, these guys were actually one of the worst defenses in football. They were like number 26 over the first 3 months last year. And then they were number 5 picking up in December. The Rams' big-time breakout game in 2024 was that Thursday night game against the 49ers defensively. So it took the Rams a while to really mesh into what they were going to be. And I think that we need to, when we judge the 2025 49ers defense, the team, when we look at the actual performance, we're going to have that kind of patience. I don't think that CJ West is going to be a game wrecker in week 1. I think he's going to make plays. I think he's a really good prospect. Same thing with Michael Williams. I think he's got a high floor with his edge setting ability. Same thing with Alfred Collins. I haven't even seen him practicing yet because he's coming back from the calf. Like all these guys, they're going to go through tougher times for the 49ers. The Rams model verified that. But anybody who knows anything about NFL football, I think should know that at this point. So we cannot expect this to be all flowers and roses, all sunshine for the 49ers early on. There is going to be a growing period. It's going to take a lot of good coaching skill from Robert Saleh. And you know who it's going to put pressure on, and I think the 49ers are fine with that because they trust him so much, is Brock Purdy in the offense. I mean, that side of the ball is going to have to lead the wagon for maybe most of the season, maybe all of the season. But I still think that the defense can be improved. And then the question is, how high can they take this? And since this is a team sport, if the 49ers shield this defense appropriately, if you don't expose them to too many snaps early in the season, if you give them some leads to build their confidence, if you give them some leads so that Bryce Huff can rush the passer a little bit more, that's when this can turn into some mojo down the stretch run of the season. That's how a team grows. Now, but if you put yourself behind the 8 ball early on, if the offense is not taking leadership the way that it needs to, so that means the defense is playing compromised, young, inexperienced, and the offense is not giving in a little bit of a cheat code, a little bit of a boost, well, that's when the season could get really long for the 49ers. So I think that as Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan, and this offense goes, so will the defense. I think that's going to be what the defense needs as far as runway to improve, because we know that improvement needs to happen. They need to grow over the course of the 2025 season. I want to show you guys my Exter wallet again, but I don't have it with me. Wonder where I put it. It's probably over in the other room. Well, yeah, I'll go grab the wallet in a second. I'm going to answer some questions first, though. You know, and I also have a couple really cool graphics that I think will tie everything together. The problem is that I've got to scroll back and grab them because I restarted my computer before we went live. And because of that, we did not maintain some of the graphics that I had prepared. So I'm going all the way back to Robert Saleh's hiring to have this for you. And to give you an idea of how much has happened this offseason, that's like 40 articles ago. I have been writing a lot over the course of this offseason, and I have finally found the one that I'm looking for. 49ers, this is the one I'm looking for. 49ers land their big fish in Robert Saleh. Here are the wild twists that made it possible. Within that article, we've got some of the graphics that I think are very, very applicable right now. Including Robert Saleh's performance over the years with the New York Jets. How about this? So you want to be further to the right and further up. Saleh with the Jets in 2023, that was the peak year with the New York Jets, was around the same spot with his defense as the 49ers in 2019, which was obviously a peak year with San Francisco. Run defense is on the x-axis. Pass defense is on the y-axis. Every single one of Saleh's 49ers defenses was above average against the run, which I think is really, really important to note. Meanwhile, his run defense is improved significantly with the Jets from 21 to 22 to 23. This right here should come as the best news probably for the 49ers as far as a good quote from Robert Saleh. Somebody asked him if he compares this to 2017 because the 49ers have brought in a lot of young talent. And Saleh said, absolutely not. He almost laughed off the question. He said the dearth of talent that the 49ers were dealing with in 2017, they've got Nick Bosa now. They have Fred Warner now. They have Deommodore Lenoir now. Just to get started, they've got 3 foundational pillars. They didn't have those pillars in 2017. Yet that 2017 defense, despite the fact that Saleh rightfully pointed out that they didn't have the talent they have now, was still decent. It was above average against the run. So I think this is the floor for Robert Saleh. The 2017, 2018, that is the absolute performance floor, even with completely talent bereft units. 2020 saw more injuries than 2024 for the 49ers, and Saleh still managed to create an above average defense. They're in the upper right, which is where you want to be. So it's one of those things where the data seems to scream upper right for the 49ers this year, because they're going to be healthier, you would hope, than they were in 2024. I get that they got younger, but the run defense was already way down here in 2024. The 49ers in 2024, see where my cursor's moving? That's where they would have been. So how do you not get better, like to at least get, somewhere up here, maybe a little bit under 2020? I think they can move into the top right. I don't think they're going to be the 2019 defense, but that's not the point. I think the offense is going to have to lead some of the way, and the special teams is going to have to not screw it up for San Francisco. And I'm sure that we'll talk about those units at different times, the offense and the special teams. We got some snap counts from last year. This is good as well. So red means the player didn't play in that particular week. Green means that they played a lot if it's darker green, and then a compromised week would be indicated by yellow. Players who ended the season on injured reserve, players who are no longer on the team anymore this year, are crossed out. So as you can see, Bosa, everything was decently good as far as his participation rate all the way until that week 11 game against Seattle. Then his season hit a wall. Javon Hargrave went on injured reserve after the game against the Rams. The 49ers didn't see him. Malik Collins was decently available throughout the whole year for the 49ers. Not bad. Same thing with Leonard Floyd, although toward the end, you could see these guys were running out of gas. It got a little bit more yellow and orange there toward the end. Here's what I mean about Dre Greenlaw. I mean, it's essentially a solid bar of red with one exception, that game against the Rams. Warner, that's impressive as hell. You could see where he fractured the ankle in week 4. He missed a half against the Patriots. Lenore missed a couple games, but otherwise was in there the whole time. Travarius Ward dealing with the tragedy last season at cornerback. Isaac Yiadom available sometimes, then not as available down the stretch run of the season. Renardo Green, once he emerged, he held on to that cornerback spot. Great sign for the 49ers. It was week 6 where Renardo Green against the Seattle Seahawks up in Seattle. Remember when he ran the route for DK Metcalf? I thought that was a big moment for the 49ers defense. Here's what I mean about Talanoa Hufanga's lack of availability last year. It wasn't until the last 5 games of the year that San Francisco truly saw him in one stretch. And then there's Malik Mustafa, who was available for the 49ers, but did tear his ACL in the final game. So he was really good, though. He was one of the best cover safeties, maybe the best cover safety. Numbers-wise, he was the best cover safety that we saw in the NFL last season. Anyway, good graphics. How about some good questions now? People talking about Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's going to be the first quarterback that this 49ers defense faces. So there's your first measuring stick. I think people need to remember that despite the fact that Sam Darnold won 14 games with the Vikings last year, they went 14-3. He still finished number 14 in QBR. He is not at Brock Purdy's level. I think he's a talented quarterback. I love Sam. This crowning of a QB just because his team won a lot of games needs to stop. People need to start looking at the actual quarterback performance a little bit more intelligently. In the case of Brock Purdy, he was number 1 in QBR the year the 49ers won a ton of games in 2023. They won a ton of games as well in 2022. And even when they lost quite a few games last year, he's still just number 7 in QBR. It's not like the bottom fell out for Brock Purdy. It was still a significantly better score, significantly better efficiency than somebody whose team won 14 games in Sam Darnold. Anyway, Darnold has his weaknesses. We know those. We also know that he's regained confidence. Now he's the quarterback of the Seahawks, and this 49ers defense will face him as their first test. I don't know, KJ. You're mentioning somebody as a trustworthy 49ers journalist. I think you could trust this channel. I will point out that we didn't predict that the 49ers would pick Mac Jones in 2021. And the amount of people who got that wrong, to be honest, I think is quite embarrassing. That's a black mark on a lot of the 49ers reporting discourse over the years. So let's just remember back to 2021. I will say I will go to bat for the track record of this channel and my work, and I would say that we've gotten it right the vast majority of the time, which you can't really say about many other sources covering the 49ers. KJ says Brock has the big brain. Brock is a very, very fast processor at the quarterback position. Hiram asks, are all of our draft picks signed? The 49ers have signed everyone except for Alfred Collins, but most second-round draft picks have not yet signed because the first two teams at the top of the second round decided to give their second rounders fully guaranteed contracts, which is completely unprecedented. So now agents and teams are trying to figure out how far into the second round those guarantees are going to last. So we wait because that's a huge change, and I have no idea why. I think it was the Browns did it and somebody else did it. I have no idea why those two teams did it, but they did it, and that has slowed the process down. All right, guys, I really appreciate it. I've got to go grab a meal. We've gone over 41 minutes. We talk about, is the 49ers defense actually improved in our roster judgment? Remember, this is not a 2025 team judgment. This is just a look at the roster, this roster right here. Now we'll get to find out how the 49ers actually perform once this roster does take the field. Thanks, everybody, for your good questions. This was fun. I will talk to you guys very soon.